The film opens in Chicago in 1956 and centers around a modest, quiet tailor shop run by an older man named Leonard Burling. Although he now lives in the United States, Leonard is originally from Britain and moved to America a few years earlier. Before coming to Chicago, he spent many years working at one of the most prestigious tailoring houses in London. For personal reasons, he eventually chose to leave England behind and start a new life. After settling in Chicago, Leonard opened his own small shop and brought on a young and attractive woman named Mabel Shawn to work as his assistant. Leonard's tailor shop is widely respected across Chicago, and many wealthy families consider it their go-to place for fine clothing. Among his most regular clients is the Boyle family, a name closely associated with power and influence in the city's criminal underworld. The Boyles frequently visit Leonard's shop, not only to have suits made, but also to collect secret messages delivered through a mailbox inside the store. Leonard has intentionally allowed this mailbox to exist, presenting it as a way for customers to leave notes or tips. One night, the Boyle family's only son, Richie Boyle, arrives at the shop to retrieve letters sent by their associate. He is accompanied by Francis, a trusted member of the family. Leonard remains calm, showing no interest in the contents of the letters as he quietly continues his tailoring work. While going through the letters, Francis comes across one that is sent by a rival mafia group known as the Outfit. Realizing how sensitive the message is, Richie asks Leonard to step out of the room for a short time so they can read it in private. Out in the front area of the shop, Mabel shows Leonard a small gift, a snow globe that she has just received from someone she knows. Mabel has a habit of collecting snow globes featuring famous landmarks from around the world, such as the Eiffel Tower, Big Ben, and scenes from Barcelona, because she dreams of traveling beyond Chicago someday. She says that it's very surprising that Leonard, who clearly has the skill to work anywhere, chose to settle down and open his shop in Chicago. After Richie and Francis leave the shop, Leonard mentions to Mabel that a man from the clock store next door has asked to be introduced to her. Mabel shows no interest in the idea, explaining that she is already seeing someone. Leonard quickly puts the pieces together and assumes that she is involved with Richie, having noticed the two of them flirting on previous occasions. As he carefully folds a cloth, Leonard gently warns Mabel to be cautious, reminding her that Richie belongs to a violent mafia family known for guns and bloodshed. Mabel admits she understands the risks surrounding the Boyle family, but insists she can manage the situation. The conversation then shifts when Mabel asks for a raise, saying she wants to save money to travel the world. Leonard responds that he would consider it if her skills improved, pointing out that she still struggles with simple tasks like folding a washcloth correctly. Once the shop closes for the night, Mabel heads home while Leonard stays behind to finish his work. Later, he falls asleep at his desk and is troubled by a dream filled with memories of his family and fire. Not long after, Leonard is startled awake by the sound of the shop door opening, only to discover that Mabel and Richie have come there together to spend some time alone. This confirms Leonard's suspicion about the romantic connection between Mabel and Richie. That night, Richie opens up to Mabel about Francis, the man he refers to as his adopted brother. Francis believes that someone inside the Boyle family is secretly passing information to their rival gang, La Fontaine. Richie clearly resents Francis, mainly because his father, Roy Boyle, places far more trust in him than in his own son. Richie refuses to see Francis as real family, viewing him instead as an outsider who wants his father's life by taking 6 bullets meant for him. In Richie's mind, his father's loyalty to Francis comes from guilt rather than genuine affection. As Richie talks, Leonard accidentally drops something, causing a brief noise that alerts them. Acting quickly, Leonard returns to his desk and pretends to be asleep, avoiding suspicion. Not wanting to disturb him, Mabel quietly leads Richie out of the shop. A few days later, Richie and Francis return as usual to collect their mail. That evening, they discover another envelope from the outfit, this time containing both a letter and an audio cassette. They leave immediately to inform Roy Boyle. Later that same night, the two men rush back to Leonard's shop in panic. Francis carries a badly wounded Richie, who has been shot in the stomach, into the back room where Leonard works. Francis then contacts Roy, explaining that they were attacked by the La Fontaine gang and are now hiding inside Leonard's shop. Roy Boyle informs them that he will arrive shortly to take care of the situation. Soon after, Francis turns to Leonard and asks him to sew up Richie's gunshot wound to stop the bleeding. Leonard hesitates, admitting that he has never treated a human injury before, but he ultimately agrees, drawing on limited experience he once had in violent situations. The pain is unbearable, and Richie eventually passes out, especially since the wound is stitched without any anesthesia. However, Leonard manages to close the injury and successfully control the bleeding. While this is happening, Francis takes the cassette from the suitcase and asks Leonard to keep an eye on Richie for a short time. Leonard refuses, insisting that Francis remove Richie in the suitcase, as he wants no part in the Boyle family's dangerous affairs. Despite this, Francis argues that Leonard's shop is the safest place available and convinces him to let Richie remain there for now. Francis then leaves in a hurry, explaining that he needs to find a cassette player to listen to the tape. Before going, he reveals that the cassette contains wiretapped recordings involving someone from the Boyle family. Francis believes there is a mole within the Boyle organization working with the FBI, which leads him to secretly place a listening device in one of the locations the family frequently uses. He and Richie originally planned to listen to the tape somewhere else, but before they could do so, they were ambushed by the LaFontaine gang, leaving Richie seriously wounded. The cassette is highly valuable, and several crime families want it destroyed because it could bring down the Boyles. This is why Francis is desperate to find a cassette player as quickly as possible to identify the traitor hiding inside their ranks. Not long after Francis leaves the shop, Richie finally regains consciousness. Leonard tells him that Francis has already explained everything about the recordings and the suspected betrayal. Leonard then asks Richie if he has any idea who within the family might be leaking information. He suggests that the traitor could be someone trusted by the Boyles, yet not officially part of the family, as Leonard calmly stitches fabric at his desk. He suddenly claims that he himself is the one who passed information to their enemies. Richie goes quiet for a moment before bursting into laughter, assuming Leonard is joking. Leonard laughs along and keeps working, and Richie dismisses the idea entirely, saying Leonard is nothing more than a simple tailor. At this point, Leonard corrects him, explaining that he is not a tailor, but a cutter, pointing out that anyone with needle and thread can be a tailor, but a cutter is something entirely different. Leonard goes on to explain that he spent many years training at one of the finest tailoring houses in the world, known as The Row. He worked there as an apprentice for a long time before finally earning the right to open a shop of his own. Shifting the conversation back to the Boyle family, Leonard brings up Francis's obsession with uncovering the traitor, and casually suggests that Francis himself could be the one betraying them. Not long after this remark, Francis returns to the shop. Before he has a chance to speak with Richie, Leonard quietly pulls him aside and whispers that Richie believes Francis is the traitor and has even opened the suitcase Francis left behind. In reality, Leonard is carefully manipulating both men, planting doubt to turn them against each other. Influenced by Leonard's earlier words, Richie begins aggressively questioning Francis, asking how it is possible that during the LaFontaine ambush, Richie was the only one shot while Francis escaped completely unharmed. Francis dismisses the accusation, claiming it was simply a matter of luck. He then insists on taking the cassette to be played immediately, but Richie stops him, saying they should wait for his father, who is on the way. The tension quickly explodes, and the argument escalates into a physical fight as both men struggle over the tape. Eventually, Richie and Francis discover that the suitcase is empty, and the confrontation turns deadly. Both men draw their guns, aiming at each other. Richie fires first, but misses his target, while Francis's shot strikes Richie in the neck, killing him instantly. In a panic, Francis searches for the cassette that Richie was believed to have hidden. Moments later, Roy Boyle arrives at Leonard's shop with his men. Clearly shaken, Francis begs Leonard to help by hiding Richie's body and buying him some time so he can clean the blood from the floor. By the time Roy steps inside, the shop appears spotless, and Francis has had enough time to come up with a false story about Richie's disappearance. Francis tells Roy that Richie left on his own, taking the tape from the outfit without explaining where he was headed. Roy orders Francis to track his son down and bring him back immediately. While waiting, Roy stays behind and speaks with Leonard. He explains that the outfit is currently the most powerful criminal organization in the world, with operations spread across Europe and the United States. Roy also reveals that the Boyle family has been offered an alliance with this organization, mainly because they are the only group willing to stand up to LaFontaine. To support the Boyles, The outfit sent them the FBI wiretap recordings, hoping the family would uncover the traitor in their own ranks. Leonard reacts with surprise and asks Roy why he is suddenly sharing sensitive information, pointing out that Roy has never discussed gang business with him before. Roy then reveals that he has realized Richie must be inside the shop since his coat is still hanging there. Knowing his son would never leave his coat behind during winter, Roy becomes certain that Leonard is hiding the truth. He pulls out a gun and threatens Leonard, demanding to know what really happened. Before Leonard can respond, Francis suddenly enters the room, dragging Mabel with him. Fearing that Francis might kill her, Leonard quickly invents a story. He claims that Richie felt humiliated because Francis managed to shoot 4 men from the LaFontaine gang, while Richie failed to hit anyone. According to Leonard, Richie left the shop to go back to LaFontaine territory in order to prove himself to his father. Leonard adds that Richie personally warned him not to inform Roy, saying he did not want his father to worry. Roy then questions Francis about why Mabel was brought there. Francis answers that Richie most likely went to Mabel's apartment since she is his girlfriend. When Roy demands to know Richie's current location, Mabel honestly admits that she has no idea. Francis then cuts in, stating that he noticed bloodstains on Mabel's carpet, suggesting that it could belong to Richie. Losing his patience, Roy begins to intimidate Mabel, using violence to force her to tell the truth. Seeing the situation spiral out of control, Leonard steps in and physically stops Roy, trying to calm him before things go any further. He then reveals a painful part of his past, explaining that he once had a wife and a daughter who both died in a fire. Because of that loss, Leonard has come to see Mabel as a daughter of his own. Moments later, the telephone rings and Leonard quickly answers the call. He tells Roy that the caller was Richie, who claims he is hiding from the LaFontaine gang and needs to be picked up at 31st Street. Without hesitation, Roy and his men rush out to retrieve him. Francis chooses to stay behind, saying he wants to keep an eye on Leonard and Mabel in case Leonard has lied. Once they are alone, Leonard admits the truth and says that he intentionally gave Roy a false location, hoping LaFontaine would ambush him and his men. Leonard then delivers another shocking revelation, stating that Mabel is actually the traitor everyone has been searching for. By getting close to Richie, Mabel gained access to sensitive information about the Boyle family and secretly passed it to LaFontaine in exchange for money. Knowing that Francis would eventually uncover her actions, Mabel turned to the FBI, arranging wiretaps and planning to have the entire Boyle family arrested. This would ensure her safety once the Boyles were removed. Leonard confesses that he has known about Mabel's scheme all along, but chose to stay silent, understanding that she was driven by her dream of making enough money to travel the world. Leonard later reveals that he was the one who secretly hid the tapes in order to protect Mabel. Not long after, LaFontaine and his men arrive at the shop to pay Mabel for the cassette. Before their arrival, Francis instructs Leonard and Mabel to use a secret signal after the exchange, allowing him to slip out from the back room and assassinate LaFontaine. Once LaFontaine takes the tape and hands over the agreed payment, Leonard and Mabel betray Francis by exposing his hiding place. LaFontaine's men immediately open fire, killing Francis on the spot. After the gang leaves, Leonard admits that he was the mastermind behind the entire setup. He explains that he was the one who originally placed the tape into the mailbox under the name The Outfit to lure the Boyle family into internal conflict. The cassette given to LaFontaine was never real, as it contained a fake recording made using Leonard's own voice. The genuine tape remains safely hidden with Leonard, preserved so Mabel can eventually hand it over to the FBI. His plan is to ensure that both the Boyle family and the LaFontaine gang are wiped out by law enforcement. Leonard then encourages Mabel to follow her dream and travel the world using the money she has earned. Later that night, Leonard packs up his belongings and sets his shop on fire, destroying all remaining evidence. Suddenly, Francis, who is still alive, reappears and fires at Leonard. The bullet misses its mark and only wounds Leonard's arm. Facing Francis, Leonard finally reveals his true past. He explains that he was once a mobster himself, but after abandoning his boss and fleeing to London, his former associates tracked him down and burned his home, killing his wife and daughter. Broken by the tragedy, Leonard moved to Chicago to start over and live an honest life. The film ends with Leonard walking away from the burning shop, leaving Chicago behind in search of a better future.